The dusty streets of Fort Bridger, Wyoming territory, had never been kind to Ella Sullivan. But on this scorching afternoon in July of 1876, they seemed particularly cruel, as she stumbled through the rutted road carrying 2 buckets of pig slop that threatened to spill with every unsteady step. Her worn boots caught on a loose stone, sending her sprawling forward. The buckets flew from her hands, their contents splashing across the dry earth and spattering the hooves of a chestnut mare tied to the post outside the general store. Ella hit the ground hard, her palms scraping against the rough dirt as laughter erupted from the men lounging on the boardwalk. "Worthless girl cannot even carry slop without making a mess," Old Man Henderson called out, spitting tobacco juice that landed uncomfortably close to where she lay. "Your pa should have left you in that orphanage where he found you." Ella pushed herself up slowly, her face burning with humiliation as she kept her eyes down. At 19 years old, she had endured 7 years of this treatment since Thomas Sullivan had taken her from the territorial orphanage in Cheyenne, promising her a home and family. What she had gotten instead was endless labor, insults, and the constant reminder that she was nothing but an unwanted burden who should be grateful for the roof over her head and the scraps she ate. "Get on now, before you cause more trouble," another voice joined in. "Sullivan will tan your hide when he hears about this." She scrambled to gather the empty buckets, her hands shaking. The mare she had startled shifted nervously, and Ella froze as a pair of well-worn leather boots appeared in her line of vision. She braced herself for another verbal lashing. "Easy there." The voice was deep and calm, addressing the horse rather than her. Large, work-roughened hands reached down to steady the mare's bridle. "No harm done, girl." For a moment, Ella thought he was speaking to her, but then realized he meant the horse. She dared a glance upward, and found herself looking at a tall man in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His face was angular and strong, with a straight nose and eyes the color of whiskey that currently held concern as he examined his horse for any injury. "I am sorry, sir," Ella whispered, clutching the buckets to her chest like shields. "I did not mean to frighten your animal." Those amber eyes turned to her then, and she saw something in them she was not accustomed to seeing directed her way. Genuine interest rather than contempt. His gaze took in her threadbare dress, the bruises on her arms that no amount of long sleeves could fully hide in this heat, and her scraped palms now dotted with blood. "You are hurt," he said, his voice carrying a hint of an accent she could not quite place. Not the drawl of Texas or the clipped tones of the East, but something softer. "It is nothing," she said quickly, taking a step backward. "I should go before I cause more trouble." "That girl is nothing but trouble, Mr. Bennett," Henderson interjected. "Worthless as they come." Sullivan took pity on her years back, and she has been a plague on his household ever since. The man, Mr. Bennett, turned slowly to face Henderson, and though his expression remained neutral, something in his bearing made the older man shift uncomfortably. "I do not recall asking for your opinion on the matter." Henderson sputtered, but before he could respond, Mr. Bennett had turned his attention back to Ella. "What is your name?" "Ella Sullivan, sir." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Well, Miss Sullivan, my horse is fine and accidents happen to everyone. There is no need to look so frightened." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a clean handkerchief, offering it to her. "For your hands." Ella stared at the white cloth as if it were made of gold. No one in Fort Bridger had ever offered her such kindness. She hesitated, afraid it was some sort of trick. "Go on," he encouraged gently. "It is just a handkerchief." With trembling fingers, she accepted it and pressed it against her bleeding palms. "Thank you, I will wash it and return it to you." "There is no rush." He studied her for another moment, and she felt exposed under his scrutiny, though not in an unpleasant way. "Do you live far from here?" "The Sullivan farm, about 3 miles north." She gestured vaguely with one bucket. "You walked 3 miles to carry pig slop." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Mr. Sullivan trades with the hotel kitchen. They save their scraps for the pigs." She did not mention that she made this walk twice daily, in all weather, or that it was one of her lighter tasks. Before Mr. Bennett could respond, a harsh voice cut through the afternoon air. "Ella, what in blazes are you doing standing around gossiping like some common fool?" Thomas Sullivan strode toward them, his face red with anger and something else, probably the whiskey he favored from the saloon. He was a stocky man in his 50s, with a cruel mouth and small eyes that darted between Ella and the stranger with suspicion. "Sir, I apologize," Ella said quickly, dropping into a slight curtsy of deference. "I fell and spilled the buckets. I was just about to refill them." "Fell? You clumsy, worthless girl. I should never have wasted my charity on you." Sullivan grabbed her arm roughly, his fingers digging into the already bruised flesh. "Get moving before I take a switch to you right here in the street. Mr. Sullivan, I presume." Mr. Bennett's voice held a note of steel that made the older man pause. "Sebastian Bennett. I own the property adjoining yours to the east." Sullivan's demeanor changed instantly, his grip on Ella loosening slightly as he forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Mr. Bennett, of course. Heard you bought the old Crawford place a few months back. Big spread, that one." "Indeed. I have been focusing on getting the ranch operational, which is why I have not had the pleasure of meeting my neighbors until now." Sebastian's gaze flickered to where Sullivan still gripped Ella's arm. "I was just telling Miss Sullivan that my horse took no harm from her accident." "Miss Sullivan," Thomas scoffed, releasing Ella so suddenly she stumbled. "She is no miss, just a charity case I took in out of the goodness of my heart, an orphan with no prospects and less sense." Ella felt her face burn with humiliation. She wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. But when she dared another glance at Sebastian Bennett, she did not see the expected agreement or dismissal in his expression. Instead, his jaw had tightened, and his eyes held something that looked remarkably like anger, though not directed at her. "I see," Sebastian said slowly. "Well, every person has worth, regardless of their circumstances. I have found that those dismissed by others often possess the greatest value, if someone takes the time to look." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Thomas Sullivan's face reddened further, but he was not foolish enough to argue with a man who owned one of the largest properties in the territory. Instead, he grabbed Ella's shoulder and shoved her toward the hotel. "Get those buckets filled and get home. There is work waiting, and I will not have you shirking your duties to flirt with men above your station." He turned to Sebastian with an oily smile. "You will have to forgive her, Mr. Bennett. The girl sometimes forgets her place." Sebastian said nothing, but his eyes followed Ella as she hurried away, and she could feel his gaze on her back like a warm touch. She did not understand what had just happened, or why a successful rancher would defend someone like her, but the handkerchief clutched in her hand, and his words about worth echoed in her mind long after she had refilled the buckets and begun the long walk home. The Sullivan farm was not really a farm in the traditional sense. Thomas Sullivan had bought the property years ago with money inherited from a distant relative, but he lacked both the skill and the motivation to make it truly productive. A handful of pigs, some chickens, and a milk cow comprised the livestock. The fields grew wild with weeds, and the house itself was a ramshackle structure that leaked when it rained and let in every draft during the harsh Wyoming winters. Ella did the majority of the work, while Thomas spent his days in town drinking and complaining about his misfortune to anyone who would listen. She tended the animals, maintained the garden that provided most of their food, hauled water from the creek, chopped wood, cooked, cleaned, and performed countless other tasks from dawn until well after dark. Her room was a tiny space off the kitchen, barely large enough for the straw mattress on the floor and a wooden crate that held her two other dresses, both as worn as the one she currently wore. That evening, as she prepared a meager supper of beans and cornbread, Thomas sat at the table sharpening his knife and watching her with narrowed eyes. "You stay away from Sebastian Bennett," he said suddenly, the blade scraping against the whetstone with an unpleasant sound. "A man like that has no business talking to the likes of you." "Yes, sir," Ella replied, keeping her attention on the pot she stirred. "I mean it, girl. You go getting ideas above your station and it will end badly for you. Bennett is a rich man, probably looking for a wife with a proper pedigree and dowry, not some foundling orphan who cannot even walk down the street without causing a commotion." Ella said nothing, knowing from experience that any response would only prolong the lecture. But later, lying on her thin mattress in the darkness, she pulled Sebastian Bennett's handkerchief from beneath her pillow where she had hidden it. She had washed it carefully in the creek and dried it in the sun, and now she held it to her cheek, marveling at its softness. "Every person has worth," he had said. Those words played over and over in her mind like a melody she could not forget. No one had ever said anything like that to her before, and she found herself clinging to them like a lifeline. Sleep came slowly that night, and when it did, she dreamed of amber eyes and a voice that spoke to her with kindness. 3 days passed before Ella saw Sebastian Bennett again. She was at the creek that marked the boundary between the Sullivan property and what had once been the Crawford Ranch, washing clothes on the rocks as she did every week. It was hard, thankless work that left her hands raw and her back aching, but she found a measure of peace here, away from Thomas Sullivan's constant criticism. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up, water dripping from the shirt she had been scrubbing. Sebastian rode toward her on his chestnut mare, sitting easy in the saddle with the confidence of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback. He wore work clothes today, denim pants and a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, and a hat that shaded his face from the midday sun. "Miss Sullivan," he called out, touching the brim of his hat in greeting as he drew near. "I hope I am not disturbing you." Ella scrambled to her feet, suddenly conscious of her wet dress and disheveled appearance. "Mr. Bennett." "No, sir, you are not disturbing me. I was just doing the washing." He dismounted with fluid grace and let his mare drink from the creek. "I have been riding the boundaries of my property, getting familiar with the land. This is a good water source. Do you come here often?" "Every week to do the laundry and sometimes to fetch water if the well is low." She twisted her hands in her apron nervously. "I have your handkerchief at the house. It is clean. I can fetch it for you." "There is no hurry," he said again, echoing his words from their first meeting. He looked at the pile of clothes waiting to be washed, then at her reddened hands. "That is a lot of work for one person." "I manage well enough." She did not mention that these were not just her clothes and Thomas Sullivan's, but also the laundry she took in from several families in town for a few pennies that Thomas promptly confiscated. Sebastian was quiet for a moment, and she could feel him studying her again with that intense gaze that made her feel both nervous and strangely hopeful. "Miss Sullivan, may I ask you a question that might seem forward?" "I suppose so, sir." "Are you happy here?" The question caught her so off guard that she actually looked directly at him, meeting those amber eyes for the first time since he had arrived. Happy? No one had ever asked her such a thing, Happiness was not something she had considered her due. "I have a roof over my head and food to eat," she said carefully, giving the answer Thomas Sullivan had taught her to give whenever anyone from church or town inquired about her welfare. "Mr. Sullivan took me in when no one else would. I am grateful. That is not what I asked." Sebastian's voice was gentle but persistent. "I asked if you are happy." Ella looked away, feeling tears prick at her eyes. She could not remember the last time she had cried. Tears were a luxury she could not afford. "Happiness is not for everyone, Mr. Bennett. Some of us are meant for other purposes." "I do not believe that." He moved closer, though he maintained a respectful distance. "I believe every person deserves happiness and kindness and the chance to become who they are meant to be." "You speak like a dreamer," she said softly, kneeling back down to resume her washing, needing to do something with her hands. "Perhaps. My mother used to say I saw the world through rose-colored glass, but my father taught me to see the value in things others overlook." Sebastian crouched down beside her, picking up one of the shirts and examining it critically. "Did you know that I grew up on a ranch in California? My parents came from Spain when I was just a boy. We had nothing at first, just determination and the willingness to work harder than anyone else." Ella paused in her scrubbing, surprised by this personal revelation. "I did not know that. My father died when I was 16, and my mother followed him 2 years later. I spent the next 7 years building up our ranch until I could sell it for enough money to start fresh somewhere new. I chose Wyoming because the land is good here, and because I wanted to prove that I could succeed on my own merits, not just by continuing what my parents started." "That is admirable," Ella said, meaning it. She could hear the pride and love in his voice when he spoke of his parents, and it made her chest ache with longing for something she had never known. "My point," Sebastian continued, "is that I understand what it is like to be looked down upon. When we first arrived in California, people called my mother terrible names because she did not speak English well. They cheated my father in business deals because he was an immigrant. They acted as if we were worth less than them because we looked different and sounded different." "But you succeeded anyway," Ella said. "We did, but not because we accepted their assessment of our worth. We succeeded because my parents knew their own value and taught me to know mine." He reached out and gently took the shirt from her hands, his fingers brushing hers. The touch sent a jolt through her that was not unpleasant. "You do the work of 3 people from what I have observed. You maintain this property almost single-handedly, yet Thomas Sullivan treats you like you are worthless." "But I have been watching, Miss Sullivan, and I see your value even if others do not." Ella's breath caught in her throat. "Why would you watch me? Why would you care about someone like me?" Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because when I look at you, I see someone brave and strong who has been beaten down by life but refuses to break. I see someone who deserves so much better than what she has been given. And if I am being completely honest, I see someone I would very much like to know better." Her heart pounded so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Mr. Bennett, I do not understand. You are a successful rancher, a man of property and means. I am nobody. You are Ella Sullivan, and that is somebody." His hand covered hers completely, warm and solid and real. "I know this is sudden, and I know you have no reason to trust me, but I would like to offer you something." "What could you possibly offer me?" She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice but failed. "A choice." Sebastian's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "Come work for me. I need help at the ranch. Someone to manage the household, help with the books, oversee the day-to-day operations. The work would be hard, but no harder than what you do now. I would pay you a fair wage, provide room and board, and treat you with the respect you deserve." Ella stared at him, convinced she must have misheard. "You are offering me employment?" "Yes. And before you protest that Thomas Sullivan would never allow it, I should tell you that legally, you are not bound to him. You are 19 years old, well past the age of majority. He has no legal claim on you. He took me in," she whispered. "I owe him." "You owe him nothing. From what I have been able to learn in town, he received a stipend from the territorial government for taking in an orphan. He was paid to provide for you, Ella. You do not owe him for doing what he was compensated to do, especially when he has failed to do even that adequately." The revelation stunned her. Thomas had always presented himself as her charitable savior, and she had accepted that narrative without question. "I did not know." "I suspect there is much you do not know because he has kept you isolated and dependent." Sebastian squeezed her hand gently. "You do not have to answer me now. Think about it. But know that the offer stands, and it comes with no expectations beyond honest work for honest pay." "Why?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "Why would you do this for me? You do not know me." Sebastian smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him devastatingly handsome. "I would like to, though. Know you, I mean. And perhaps I am selfish, because the truth is, I need help, and I believe you are exactly the person for the job. But more than that, when I saw you in town the other day, something in me recognized something in you. I cannot explain it better than that." Ella felt tears spill over and track down her cheeks before she could stop them. Sebastian released her hand and pulled another handkerchief from his pocket, offering it with the same gentle courtesy he had shown before. "Please do not cry," he said softly, "unless those are good tears." "I do not know what kind they are," she admitted, dabbing at her face. "I am overwhelmed. This does not seem real." "It is real, I promise you. Take some time to think about it. I am not going anywhere." He stood, brushing dust from his pants. "I should let you get back to your work." "But Ella, I meant every word. You have value, and I see it clearly." He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Ella sitting by the creek with her heart racing and her mind spinning with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. For the next 2 weeks, Ella wrestled with Sebastian's offer. Every morning she woke to Thomas Sullivan's shouting. Every day she performed her endless tasks, and every night she fell into bed exhausted and bruised from the accidental shoves and rough handling that were a regular part of her life. But now, something had changed. The cage she had lived in for 7 years suddenly had a door, and Sebastian Bennett was offering her the key. She saw him 3 more times during those weeks, always at the creek when she came to wash clothes or fetch water. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his ranch, the improvements he was making, his plans for breeding horses and cattle. He spoke of his childhood in Spain, the ocean voyage to America, the challenges and triumphs of building a new life in a foreign land. In turn, Ella found herself opening up in ways she never had before. She told him about her earliest memories of the orphanage, the constant hunger and cold, the matron who had been kind to her and taught her to read and write in secret. She spoke of her hope when Thomas Sullivan had chosen her, how she thought she was finally getting a family, and the slow, crushing realization that she was merely unpaid labor. "You remember your parents at all?" Sebastian asked one afternoon as they sat on a fallen log by the creek, watching dragonflies skim the water's surface. "No. I was told my mother died birthing me and that my father left me at the orphanage a few days later. I do not even know their names. The matron said my father just called me Ella and nothing more." She plucked at a loose thread on her dress. "Sometimes I make up stories about them, imagining that they would have loved me if things had been different." "I am sure they would have," Sebastian said firmly. "How could anyone not love you?" The words made her blush and look away. Over these stolen conversations, she had become increasingly aware of Sebastian not just as a kind stranger or potential employer, but as a man. She noticed the way his hair curled at his collar, the strength in his hands, the warmth in his smile. More concerning, she noticed the way her heart raced when he was near, the disappointment she felt when their visits ended, the fact that she found herself thinking about him constantly. It was foolish, she told herself. He was offering her employment, nothing more. He was being kind to someone he pitied. There could never be anything more between a successful rancher and a penniless orphan. But despite her rational thoughts, she could not deny the way he looked at her sometimes, with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. And she could not ignore the casual touches that seemed to come more frequently. His hand steadying her elbow when she stumbled on the rocks, his fingers brushing hers when he handed her a wildflower he had picked, the way he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when the wind blew it across her face. "You have been thinking about my offer," Sebastian said, pulling her from her thoughts. It was not a question. "I have thought of little else," she admitted, and Ella took a deep breath. "I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of everything. Of leaving the only home I have known, even if it is not a good one. Of failing at whatever tasks you set me. Of disappointing you. Of being worthless, just like everyone says." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Of hoping for something better and having it taken away." Sebastian turned to face her fully, taking both of her hands in his. "I cannot promise that you will never fail or make mistakes. We all do. But I can promise that I will never call you worthless or treat you as anything less than the valuable person you are. As for hope, Ella, hope is not weakness. It is one of the bravest things a person can hold on to. When my mother was dying," he continued, "she told me that God puts people in our paths for a reason. Sometimes we are meant to help them, and sometimes they are meant to help us. I believe you and I were meant to meet, and I believe we are meant to help each other." "How could I possibly help you?" Ella asked, genuinely confused. "By being exactly who you are, by bringing life to a house that has been empty too long, by sharing your strength and your kindness and your quiet courage." His thumbs stroked across her knuckles. "By giving me someone to build something for, something with. I have been alone for a long time, Ella, and I am tired of it." Her breath caught at the emotion in his voice. "Sebastian." It was the first time she had used his given name, and it felt both terrifying and right. "Say yes," he urged softly. "Take a chance. Trust me to see you through until you can stand on your own. And maybe, if we are both very lucky, you will find that you do not want to stand alone after all." She looked into his eyes and saw no deception there, no hidden cruelty waiting to emerge. She saw only hope and honesty and something else that made her heart skip. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will come work for you." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. "Truly, truly. But I do not know how to leave. Thomas will not simply let me go." "Leave that to me." "Do you have belongings you need to collect?" Ella almost laughed. "Only 2 dresses and a few personal items, nothing of value." "Then pack them tonight. Tomorrow is Sunday. Thomas will likely go to town in the afternoon as he usually does. When he leaves, so do you. I will be waiting on the road with a wagon. Can you be ready?" Her pulse raced with fear and excitement. "I can be ready." "Good." Sebastian lifted one of her hands to his lips and pressed a kiss to her scraped knuckles. The gesture was so unexpected and tender that tears sprang to her eyes. "Tomorrow, your life changes, Ella. Tomorrow you become free." That night, Ella barely slept. She packed her meager belongings into a pillowcase. Her 2 spare dresses, a brush with half its bristles missing, the handkerchief Sebastian had given her, and a small wooden cross the kind matron from the orphanage had pressed into her hand the day she left. Everything she owned in the world fit into a bundle the size of a loaf of bread. She moved quietly through the dark house, looking at it as if for the first time. 7 years she had lived here, and she felt nothing for it but relief at leaving. There were no good memories within these walls, no moments of warmth or laughter to look back on with fondness. It had been a prison, nothing more. Thomas was snoring in his bedroom, the smell of whiskey permeating the air even through the closed door. Ella paused outside that door, wondering if she should leave a note or some explanation. But what would she say? Thank you for 7 years of cruelty. Goodbye and good riddance. In the end, she said nothing. Thomas Sullivan deserved no explanation or gratitude. He had done his legal duty and been compensated for it. That was all. Sunday dawned clear and bright. Ella went through her usual routines mechanically, her mind already far away. She fed the chickens and pigs, milked the cow, prepared breakfast which Thomas ate without a word of thanks or acknowledgement, and cleaned up after him. Every moment felt surreal, like she was watching herself from a distance. True to pattern, Thomas announced after his meal that he was going to town. There is a meeting at the church, and then I will likely stay for supper at the hotel. You will have all the evening chores done before I return, or there will be consequences. Yes, sir, Ella said, as she had said 1,000 times before. But this time the words meant nothing. This time she was lying. She waited until she saw Thomas ride away on his old horse, waited an extra 10 minutes to be certain he would not return for something forgotten, and then she grabbed her pillowcase bundle and ran. The road seemed longer than it ever had before. Every sound made her jump, certain that Thomas had somehow discovered her plan and was coming to drag her back. Her heart hammered so hard she felt lightheaded, and her hands shook as she clutched her meager belongings. Then she saw it. A wagon pulled by 2 sturdy horses, waiting at the bend in the road where it could not be seen from the Sullivan property. And standing beside it, watching for her with those warm, amber eyes, was Sebastian. "Ella," he said, and his voice was full of relief. He strode forward to meet her, and without thinking, she ran the last few steps and threw herself into his arms. He caught her easily, holding her close as she trembled against him. "You are safe now," he murmured into her hair. "I have you. You are safe." She did not realize she was crying until she felt the wetness on her cheeks. "I was afraid you would not come. I was afraid I dreamed it all. I am very real, and so is this." He pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "You are the bravest woman I have ever known. Do you realize that? I do not feel brave. I feel terrified. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it." He kissed her forehead gently. "Come, let me take you home." Home. The word resonated through her entire being. For the first time in her life, she was going to a place where she was wanted, where she had value. She was going home. The ride to Sebastian's ranch took about half an hour, traveling east from the Sullivan property into rolling grassland dotted with cottonwood trees and cut through by clear streams. Ella sat on the wagon seat beside him, acutely aware of the warmth of his body next to hers, and the solid strength of his arm as it occasionally brushed against her when he handled the reins. "Tell me about the ranch," she said, needing to fill the silence with something other than her racing thoughts. "It is called the Bennett Ranch, simple enough. 5,000 acres with good water sources and grazing land. The main house is solid, built by the Crawford family about 15 years ago. There is a barn, a bunkhouse for ranch hands, and several outbuildings. Right now, I have about 200 head of cattle, and I am starting a horse breeding program." His voice filled with enthusiasm as he spoke. "I have always loved horses. My father taught me that a good horse is worth more than gold, and I want to breed the finest working horses in the territory." "It sounds wonderful," Ella said honestly. "It will be, once everything is properly established. Right now, it is a bit rough around the edges. The Crawfords let things go before they sold, and I have spent the last few months focused on the livestock and buildings. The house is, well, functional but not what I would call comfortable." "I am accustomed to making do with very little," Ella assured him. "I know, but you should not have to." Sebastian glanced at her. "I want you to make the house into a home, Ella. Decorate it however you like, order whatever furniture or supplies you need. I have accounts at the general store and with suppliers in Cheyenne. The house is yours to manage." The enormity of what he was offering began to sink in. "Sebastian, that is a tremendous responsibility. What if I make mistakes? Then we will fix them together. I trust your judgment." He smiled at her. "Besides, anything you do will be an improvement on the current state of things." The ranch came into view over a rise, and Ella caught her breath. She had expected something modest, perhaps only slightly better than the Sullivan place. What she saw instead was a proper ranch house, 2 stories tall with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and sides. The barn was enormous, its red paint fresh and bright. Corrals held horses that gleamed in the sunlight, and in the distance, cattle grazed peacefully on the green grass. "Oh," she breathed. "Sebastian, it is beautiful." His smile widened. "Wait until you see the view from the porch at sunset. That is when this place really shows its worth." He pulled the wagon up to the front of the house and came around to help her down. His hands spanned her waist easily as he lifted her from the seat, and for a moment they stood very close, his hands lingering on her waist and her hands resting on his shoulders. "Welcome home, Ella," he said softly. Inside, the house was indeed rough around the edges as he had warned, but it was clean and well built. The main floor consisted of a large front room with a stone fireplace, a dining area, a kitchen with a proper cook stove and pump, and a small office. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms, though only one showed signs of use. "This will be your room," Sebastian said, leading her to the largest of the unused bedrooms. It had windows on 2 walls, flooding the space with light and actual furniture. A real bed with a mattress, a dresser, a wardrobe, and even a small desk and chair. "I know it is not much yet, but we can get you whatever else you need." Ella set down her pillowcase bundle and turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "Not much. Sebastian, I have never had a room like this in my life. It is beautiful. I am glad you like it." He leaned against the doorframe, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Take some time to settle in. I need to go check on the horses and give instructions to my ranch hands for the week. We can have supper together this evening, and I will explain your duties in more detail." After he left, Ella sat on the bed, running her hands over the quilt that covered it. The mattress gave slightly beneath her weight, so different from the lumpy straw she had slept on for years. She unpacked her few belongings, and they looked pitifully small in the large wardrobe, but she did not care. This was hers. This room, this space, this fresh start. She found herself at the window, looking out over the ranch spread below. She could see Sebastian in the corral, working with a young horse, his movements patient and sure. Even from this distance, she could see the care he took, the gentleness in his handling of the animal. "Every person has worth," he had told her. He believed it about her, but she was beginning to see that he believed it about everything and everyone. It was not just words with him. It was a philosophy that guided how he lived his life, and he had chosen to bring her into his life. The thought filled her with warmth and terror in equal measure. Because somewhere in the last 2 weeks, amid their conversations by the creek and his gentle kindness, Ella had done something very foolish. She had fallen in love with Sebastian Bennett. That first evening at the ranch set the pattern for the days that followed. Sebastian joined Ella for supper in the dining room, and they talked long into the evening about the ranch, about life, about dreams and plans for the future. He explained that her duties would include managing the household budget, keeping the books for the ranch, overseeing any hired help they might bring in for the house, and helping coordinate supplies and schedules for the ranch hands. "I can teach you the bookkeeping," he said. "It is not difficult, just a matter of keeping accurate records, and you do not have to do everything yourself. In fact, I do not want you to. You are the manager, not the maid. We will hire someone from town to come in for the heavy cleaning and laundry." Ella stared at him. "You want to hire help?" "Of course. This is a working ranch, not a place for one person to kill themselves trying to maintain." He poured her more coffee, a courtesy that still surprised her. "You will have enough to do with the books and managing the household without scrubbing floors." "I do not mind hard work," she said. "I know you do not, but that is not the point. The point is that you should not have to do all the work just because you can. You have value beyond your labor, Ella. I need your mind and your organizational skills, not just your ability to scrub pots." It was a revolutionary concept to her, this idea that she could be valued for something other than her capacity for endless toil. But Sebastian spoke as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The days developed a rhythm. Ella would rise early and prepare breakfast for both of them, enjoying the novelty of cooking in a well-appointed kitchen with ample supplies. Sebastian would go out to work with the ranch hands and the animals, returning for lunch which they shared together. Afternoons, he taught her the ranch bookkeeping, sitting close beside her at the desk in the office, his patience infinite as he explained entries and calculations. Those afternoon lessons became Ella's favorite time of day. Sitting so near to Sebastian, their heads bent together over the ledgers, she was intensely aware of him. The warmth of his body, the scent of leather and sunshine that clung to him, the sound of his voice as he explained things, the way his hand would cover hers to guide her pen when she was uncertain. Sometimes she would look up to find him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. In those moments, the air between them seemed to crackle with something unspoken, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. 3 weeks into her time at the ranch, Sebastian had to make a trip to Cheyenne for supplies and to meet with the territorial representative about water rights. He would be gone for 3 days. "Will you be all right here?" he asked the morning of his departure. They stood on the front porch in the early light, and he seemed reluctant to leave. "Of course. I have plenty to keep me occupied, and your ranch hands are nearby if I need anything." She smiled at him. "I am not afraid, Sebastian. I know you are not. You are braver than you give yourself credit for." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I will miss our afternoon lessons." "As will I," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. He leaned closer, his eyes dropping to her lips, and her heart hammered wildly. But then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should go if I want to make good time. Take care, Ella. Safe travels." She watched him ride away until he disappeared over the horizon, feeling his absence like a physical ache. The 3 days passed slowly, despite the work she filled them with. She organized the kitchen, started a proper inventory of household goods, and spent hours going over the ranch books, making sure she understood every entry. She wrote out menus and shopping lists, planning for the month ahead. At night, alone in the big house, she lay in her comfortable bed and thought about Sebastian. She thought about the way he smiled at her, the gentle touch of his hands, the sound of his laugh. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how valued, how seen. She was in love with him. There was no denying it anymore. But what could come of it? He had employed her as his housekeeper and manager. He was kind to her, yes, and perhaps he even enjoyed her company, but that did not mean he felt anything deeper. Men like Sebastian Bennett, successful and handsome and good, they married women of their own social standing, not penniless orphans they had rescued from abusive situations. The thought of watching him court and marry someone else someday made her feel physically ill. But she would have to bear it, she told herself. She would have to be grateful for his friendship and kindness and not yearn for more than he could offer. On the third evening, as the sun was setting, Ella heard the sound of hoofbeats. She rushed to the window and saw Sebastian riding toward the house. Her heart leaped, and she had to force herself to walk, not run, down the stairs to meet him. He dismounted quickly, and when he saw her on the porch, his face broke into such a brilliant smile that she could not help but smile back. "You are back early," she said. "I did not expect you until tomorrow. I finished my business faster than anticipated, and I found I could not wait to get home." He climbed the porch steps, and they stood facing each other in the fading light. "Did you miss me?" It was said lightly, teasingly, but Ella answered with complete honesty. "Yes, very much." Something shifted in his expression. "Ella, I need to tell you something." Her pulse quickened. "What is it?" "While I was in Cheyenne, I ran into Thomas Sullivan. He had come to town to file a complaint about you leaving." Ella felt the blood drain from her face. "What kind of complaint?" "He claimed you were his indentured servant, and that you had run away, stealing from him." Sebastian's jaw tightened with anger. "I accompanied him to the territorial office and presented the facts. That you were of legal age, that he had been compensated by the territory for your care, and that you had stolen nothing. The clerk reviewed the records and confirmed everything I said. Thomas was ordered to cease his harassment, and if he contacts you again, he can be charged with making false claims." Relief flooded through her. "So I am truly free. He cannot force me back. You are truly free. He has no claim on you whatsoever." Sebastian took a step closer. "But there is more. When I was in Cheyenne, I also visited a jeweler." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Ella's breath stopped completely as he opened it, revealing a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect sapphire. "Sebastian," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "I have been trying to find the right time and the right words, but there are never perfect words for what I feel." He took her hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "Ella, these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. When I am away from you, all I think about is getting back to you. When I am with you, everything feels right in a way it never has before. You are brave and kind and smart and beautiful, and I have fallen completely in love with you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You love me." "I love you," he confirmed. "I know this is sudden, and I know you might not feel the same way yet, but I had to tell you. I had to ask you if there is any chance, any possibility, that you might someday come to care for me as more than just your employer." Ella laughed through her tears, the sound bubbling up from the joy flooding her chest. "Someday, Sebastian, I already love you. I have loved you for weeks, maybe from the moment you offered me your handkerchief in the street and spoke to me like I mattered." "You do matter," he said fiercely. "You matter more than anything." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hand, the ring box in his other hand. "Ella Sullivan, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in all things, not just my employee? Will you build this ranch and this life with me as my equal and my wife?" "Yes," she said, not hesitating for even a moment. "Yes, Sebastian, I will marry you." He stood and slid the ring onto her finger, and then his hands cupped her face and he kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and perfect, a promise of all the love they would share. Ella's arms went around his neck, and she kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "I was so afraid you would think it too soon, that you would say no. How could I say no to the man who saw my worth when everyone else called me worthless? How could I say no to the man who gave me hope and kindness and a home?" She smiled up at him. "How could I say no to the man I love with all my heart?" "You have made me the happiest man alive," he murmured, kissing her again. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Fort Bridger, with only a handful of people in attendance. Sebastian's ranch hands came, as did the minister and his wife. Ella wore a simple but beautiful dress of pale blue that Sebastian had insisted on buying for her, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Sebastian had picked himself that morning. Thomas Sullivan did not attend, though word of the wedding had spread through the town. Ella caught glimpses of townspeople watching from across the street as they left the church, and she knew what they must be thinking: that the worthless orphan had somehow tricked the successful rancher into marriage. But their opinions no longer mattered to her. Let them think what they wanted. She knew the truth. Sebastian loved her. He had chosen her. He had seen her value and made her his partner in every sense of the word. The wedding dinner was a simple affair at the ranch, prepared by Ella with help from Maria, the woman Sebastian had hired to come in twice a week to help with household tasks. Maria was a kind soul who had quickly become a friend, and she had insisted on making a cake for the occasion. As the sun set on their wedding day, Ella stood on the porch with her husband, his arm around her waist as they watched the sky turn shades of pink and gold. "This is what I wanted you to see," Sebastian said softly. "The sunset from this porch. I stood here the day I bought this place and imagined sharing this view with someone I loved. I just did not know it would be someone as perfect as you." Ella leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I am not perfect. You are perfect for me." He kissed the top of her head. "My brave, beautiful wife. My kind, wonderful husband." She turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked past me. Thank you for valuing me when everyone else called me worthless. You were never worthless, my love. You were just waiting for someone to recognize your true worth." His smile was tender. "I am just grateful I was the one who got to see it first." Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work, laughter, and deepening love. Ella proved to be every bit as capable as Sebastian had believed. She managed the household with efficiency and skill, kept the ranch books with meticulous accuracy, and even had insightful suggestions about the business that Sebastian readily implemented. But more than her capabilities, it was her presence that transformed the ranch into a true home. She filled the house with warmth and life, planting flowers around the porch, hanging curtains she sewed herself, preparing meals that turned the dining room into a place of fellowship and joy. The ranch hands began to linger after receiving their instructions, drawn by Ella's kind words and genuine interest in their lives. Sebastian had never been happier. He loved coming in from a long day of work to find Ella in the kitchen or the office, loved the way her face lit up when she saw him. He loved their evenings together, sitting on the porch and talking about their days. He loved the way she fit perfectly in his arms at night, her head resting on his chest as they lay in the bed they now shared. "You ever regret it?" Ella asked him one night as they lay tangled together in the darkness. "Taking a chance on me?" "Never," Sebastian said without hesitation. "You are the best decision I ever made. Do you regret saying yes?" "Not for a single moment." She rose up on her elbow to look down at him. "You gave me everything I never knew I could have. A home, respect, love. You gave me myself, Sebastian. You helped me see that I was worth more than I had been told." He pulled her down for a long, slow kiss. "You always were worth everything, my love. I am just grateful you let me prove it to you." In the spring of their second year of marriage, Ella discovered she was pregnant. She was nervous to tell Sebastian, worried about how pregnancy and a baby would affect her ability to manage the ranch. But when she finally shared the news, his joy was so overwhelming that it swept away all her fears. "A baby," he kept repeating, his hand resting reverently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it. Ella, you have given me so much already, and now this." His eyes were bright with emotion. "Thank you," she laughed, cupping his face in her hands. "I think you had something to do with it, too." "Perhaps a little," he agreed with a grin, then grew serious. "But you are carrying our child, and I want you to know that your health and well-being come first. If you need to step back from some of your duties, we will hire more help. I will not have you working yourself to exhaustion." "I will be reasonable," she promised, "but I am not an invalid. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my wife carrying my baby," Sebastian said. "That is a first, and I reserve the right to be protective." As her pregnancy progressed, Sebastian proved to be as protective as he had promised, though Ella managed to convince him not to treat her like she was made of glass. She continued to manage the household and books, though she did allow him to hire additional help for the heavier tasks. In November of 1878, on a cold night with snow falling softly outside, Ella gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas after Sebastian's father, and when the midwife placed the tiny, squalling infant in Sebastian's arms, Ella saw tears streaming down her husband's face. "He is perfect," Sebastian whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Ella, he is perfect. He has your eyes," she said tiredly but happily, and it was true. Even in those first moments, she could see that their son had inherited his father's amber gaze. Sebastian carefully placed the baby in her arms and sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around her shoulders as they gazed down at their son together. "I love you," he told her. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for our son. Thank you for everything." Ella felt tears of joy slide down her cheeks. 2 years ago, she had been a worthless orphan with no future and no hope. Now she was a wife, a mother, a partner in a thriving ranch, and most importantly, she was loved. Life at the Bennett Ranch continued to flourish. Young Thomas was a happy, healthy child who toddled after his father from the moment he could walk, already showing a love for the horses and the land. When he was 3, Ella gave birth to twin girls, Maria and Rosa, named after Sebastian's mother and the kind orphanage matron who had taught Ella to read. The ranch itself grew and prospered. Sebastian's horse breeding program became renowned throughout the territory, with people traveling from neighboring states to purchase Bennett-bred horses. The cattle herd expanded, and they added sheep to their livestock. Sebastian hired more ranch hands, and under Ella's management, the operations ran with smooth efficiency. But financial success was not what made them happy. It was the life they built together, the partnership they forged, the family they created. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Sebastian took Ella back to the spot by the creek where they had first talked, where he had first offered her a chance at a different life. "You remember standing here 5 years ago?" he asked, holding her close as they watched the water flow past. "I remember everything about those days," Ella said. "I remember being so afraid, but also feeling the first stirrings of hope I had felt in years." "I knew even then that you were special," Sebastian told her. "I knew you were meant to be part of my life. I just did not know yet how completely you would transform it." Ella turned in his arms to face him. "You transformed my life, Sebastian. You saw value in me when I could not see it in myself. You made me your partner when the world called me worthless." "The world was wrong," Sebastian said firmly. "You were never worthless. You were priceless, and I am grateful every day that I was wise enough to recognize it." They kissed there by the creek, with the Wyoming sun warm on their faces and the sound of water providing a gentle soundtrack. It was the same place where their story had truly begun, and it seemed fitting to mark this milestone here. As the years continued to pass, Sebastian and Ella's love only deepened. They faced challenges together: droughts that tested their ranching skills, harsh winters that required all their strength to endure, the occasional conflict with neighbors over water rights or grazing land. But they faced everything as partners, supporting each other, valuing each other's contributions, making decisions together. Thomas grew into a fine young man who shared his father's gift with horses and his mother's head for business. The twins were bright and spirited, keeping the household lively with their antics. In time, Ella gave birth to 2 more children, another boy they named Matthew and a daughter named Hope. "Hope?" Sebastian questioned when Ella suggested the name after their youngest daughter's birth. "Any particular reason? Because that is what you gave me," Ella said simply. "When I had nothing and was nothing, you gave me hope. It seems fitting to name our daughter after such a powerful gift." Sebastian kissed her forehead tenderly. "You were never nothing, my love. But I understand what you mean, and Hope is a beautiful name for our beautiful daughter." The town of Fort Bridger grew and changed over the years. Wyoming became a state in 1890, and with it came more settlers, more businesses, more growth. The Bennett Ranch was recognized as one of the finest operations in the state, and Sebastian was frequently consulted on matters of livestock and land management. But the thing that gave Ella the most satisfaction was the way people treated her. The same townspeople who had once called her worthless, who had watched her stumble through the streets carrying pig slop, now greeted her with respect. "Mrs. Bennett," they called her, and they asked her advice on household matters, complimented her children, and invited her to join various social committees. She bore them no ill will for their past treatment. She understood now that people often failed to see value in things they considered beneath them. But Sebastian had taught her to look deeper, to see the worth in all people and situations, and she tried to live by that principle. One day, when Ella was 40 years old, she received word that Thomas Sullivan had died. He had been found in his dilapidated house, alone and impoverished, having drunk himself to death over the course of many years. The property would be sold for debts. Ella felt sadness for the waste of a life, but she could not bring herself to feel much more than that. She had made her peace with those difficult years long ago, recognizing them as part of the path that had led her to Sebastian. "Are you all right?" Sebastian asked when she told him the news. They were in their bedroom, getting ready for sleep after a long day. "I am," Ella said truthfully. "I feel sorry for him in a way. He had so much bitterness in him that he could never see the blessings he had. He could never see value in anything or anyone, including himself." "You are a better person than I am," Sebastian said, pulling her into his arms. "I cannot forgive him for the way he treated you. Perhaps not forgiveness, but pity." She looked up at her husband, this man who had changed her entire world with his kindness and vision. "He taught me what I did not want to be. And by showing me that, he helped me appreciate even more what you offered me." Sebastian kissed her slowly, deeply. "I offered you nothing you did not deserve, my love. I simply recognized what was already there." On their 25th wedding anniversary, Sebastian planned a surprise for Ella. He took her back to Fort Bridger, to the very street where they had first met, where she had stumbled with buckets of pig slop, and he had seen her not as worthless but as valuable. Why are we here?" Ella asked, confused as Sebastian helped her down from the wagon in front of what used to be the general store. "Because this is where our story began," Sebastian said. "Right here on this dusty street, I saw the woman who would become my wife, my partner, the mother of my children, and the love of my life." Ella felt tears prick her eyes as she remembered that day so long ago. She had been 19, broken down, believing herself to be worthless. Now she was 44, confident, loved, and surrounded by blessings. "I was so frightened that day," she remembered. "I thought my life was over before it had really begun." "And I thought mine was about to begin," Sebastian said. "And I was right. The moment I saw you, everything changed." He took both her hands in his, and Ella realized people were stopping to watch them, curious about what was happening. 25 years ago," Sebastian said loudly enough for the growing crowd to hear, "I met a young woman on this very spot. The town called her worthless, but I saw her value. They saw a burden, but I saw a blessing. They saw someone to be dismissed, but I saw someone to be cherished." Ella's cheeks flushed as more people gathered. She recognized some of them as the same people who had watched her fall that day so many years ago. "Ella Sullivan, now Ella Bennett, has been my wife for 25 years, Sebastian continued. "In that time, she has been my partner in building one of the finest ranches in Wyoming. She has born and raised 5 wonderful children. She has managed our home and our business with skill and wisdom. But more than any of that, she has filled my life with joy and love beyond measure." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a beautiful necklace with a sapphire pendant to match her engagement ring. "This is for you, my love, to mark 25 years of the greatest partnership I could ever have imagined. Thank you for saying yes to that scared rancher who saw your worth. Thank you for building this life with me." Ella could not speak through her tears as Sebastian fastened the necklace around her throat. The crowd applauded, and she heard several women sniffling emotionally. "I love you," she finally managed to say. "Sebastian, I love you so much." "And I love you," he replied, kissing her there in the street where their story had begun, not caring about the watching crowd. "My partner, my equal, my love." As they held each other, Ella thought about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. From worthless orphan to beloved wife and mother. From hopeless to hopeful. From invisible to valued. And it had all begun with one man who had the wisdom to see worth where others saw none, the courage to offer a hand to someone in need, and the love to make her his true partner in all things. The years continued their steady march forward. Thomas, their eldest, married a kind woman named Sarah and took over much of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, working alongside his father. The twins married as well, Maria to a local banker and Rosa to a teacher, both staying close enough to visit frequently. Matthew showed an interest in veterinary medicine and went east for schooling, while Hope, true to her name, became a teacher in Fort Bridger, bringing education and opportunity to children much as Ella had once longed for it herself. Sebastian and Ella grew older together, their hair turning silver, their faces gaining lines from years of laughter and sun. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect. They sat on their porch most evenings, watching the sunset just as they had on their wedding day, hands clasped together and hearts full of gratitude for the life they had built. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had not offered you that handkerchief?" Sebastian asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. Ella considered the question seriously. "I suppose I would have continued on as I was, working myself to death for Thomas Sullivan until I was too old or sick to be useful. Then I would have been cast out with nothing." It is not a pleasant thought. I cannot imagine a world where we did not find each other, Sebastian said, his thumb stroking over her knuckles in the gesture that had become so familiar over the decades. Nor can I. Ella smiled at him. You saved my life, Sebastian. Not just from Thomas Sullivan, but from believing I was worthless. You taught me to see my own value, and that changed everything. You saved mine too, Sebastian countered. I was alone and lonely, building a ranch but not a life. You gave me purpose beyond business. You gave me family and love, and a reason to build something lasting. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn shades of orange and purple. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. The sounds of horses in the corrals, cattle lowing in the distance, the voices of ranch hands finishing their work for the day. We built something good here, Ella said softly. Something that will last beyond us. We did, Sebastian agreed. Together. Always together. When Sebastian passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, Ella grieved deeply but not hopelessly. They had been married for 47 years, and she had loved him every single day. But she also knew that death was a natural part of life, and that she had been blessed beyond measure to have so many years with the man who had seen her value when no one else did. She continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Thomas ran the operation with the same wisdom and kindness his father had shown, and Ella remained a valued advisor, her mind still sharp and her insights still valuable. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch alone, watching the sunset and remembering. She would remember the frightened 19-year-old girl who had stumbled in the street, convinced she was worthless. She would remember the amber-eyed rancher who had offered her a handkerchief and changed her life. She would remember every conversation by the creek, every afternoon lesson in bookkeeping, every sunset watched together, every challenge faced side by side. "Thank you," she would whisper into the evening air, speaking to Sebastian though he was no longer there to hear. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for making me your partner." And in the gentle Wyoming wind, in the beauty of the sunset, in the prosperity of the ranch they had built together, she felt his presence and his love, as real and strong as it had been on the day he first took her hand. Ella lived to the age of 83, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. When she passed away peacefully one spring morning, the Bennett Ranch stretched across 10,000 acres, employed dozens of people, and was known throughout Wyoming and beyond for the quality of its horses and cattle. But more than that, it was known as a place built on the foundation of love, respect, and the radical belief that every person has value. Her children buried her next to Sebastian on a hill overlooking the ranch, and on her headstone, they inscribed the words that had defined her life. Ella Sullivan Bennett. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. They called her worthless. He saw her value and made her his partner. Together they built a legacy of love. And on Sebastian's headstone, Thomas added a matching inscription, Sebastian Bennett. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he saw worth where others saw none. In loving her, he showed us all how to truly see. The Bennett Ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, each new generation learning the story of how it all began. They learned about the worthless orphan and the wise rancher, about the handkerchief and the creek, about the courage it took to see value in the overlooked, and the love that built an empire. And every spring, the family would gather at the graves on the hill, bringing wildflowers like the one Sebastian had picked for Ella's wedding bouquet, and they would tell the story again. The story of how their great-great-grandmother Ella had been called worthless, how their great-great-grandfather Sebastian had seen her value, and how together, As equal partners bound by love and respect, they had built something that would last forever. It was a story about more than just romance, though the love between Sebastian and Ella had been deep and true. It was a story about the power of seeing people truly, of recognizing worth in unexpected places, of having the courage to stand against the crowd's judgment and follow your own wisdom. It was about partnership and equality, about building together rather than one person serving the other. Most of all, it was a story about how love, real love, sees value where others see none, offers hope where there is despair, and creates something beautiful from what the world has dismissed as worthless. And that story, passed down through the generations, continued to inspire and guide the Bennett family for over 100 years, a lasting testament to the day Sebastian Bennett looked at Ella Sullivan and saw not what she was called, but what she truly was: valuable, worthy, and destined to be his beloved partner in all things. The end came full circle, as all good stories do, back to that dusty street in Fort Bridger where a young woman fell, and a young man offered a handkerchief. But it was not really the end. It was the beginning of a legacy that proved, once and for all, that worth is not determined by circumstances or other people's opinions, but by the love that sees truly, the hands that reach out to help, and the hearts brave enough to recognize value wherever in it may be found.